What's up guys, so today's video is going to be in honor of my first big book haul of 2021, possibly my only big book haul of 2021, we'll see how it goes. I got these books from a variety of different places, ordering them in online or curbside pickup, and yeah, I basically cover history, fantasy, and general fiction. Not to delay things too much, I'll just kick off right away with the history related books I picked up. The first book I picked up was The History of Iceland by Gunnar Karlsson, and as the title suggests, this is a book about the history of Iceland. It covers the foundation of the country up until the 20th century, and it was published in 2000, so relatively recent book still. I went looking for this book because as I was reading some of my favorite Icelandic mysteries, some of them were touching on early modern Icelandic and modern Icelandic history. I realized I hadn't read too much about those eras. I've read quite a bit of medieval Icelandic history, especially early medieval, but never really early modern or modern Icelandic history. So this book is divided into 4 sections, starting with colonization and Commonwealth from 870 until 1262. And then we've got Iceland under foreign rule from 1262 until 1800. Third section is A Primitive Society Builds a State, 1809 to 1918. And then the final chapter, or the final section I should say, is The Great 20th Century Transformation. So yeah, I think this book is really going to scratch that itch I had for reading some more recent Icelandic history. And yeah, I really like the cover of this one as well. The next history book I got is A History of the Swedish People by Vilhelm Moberg. And actually this is a 2-volume series of books, so this is the first volume. And I actually came across this when I was looking for the History of Iceland book, and it looked really interesting, so just kind of picked it up on a whim. The author basically wanted to showcase the history of the common people rather than specifically of kings and aristocracy, which is of course kind of the traditional focus of a lot of histories. Yeah, so it was kind of a bit of a whim, but I'm really happy I picked it up. And this particular volume focuses on prehistory and goes up until the Renaissance period. I also really like this cover as well. The second book, predictably, is volume 2 of A History of the Swedish People by Vilhelm Moberg. And this book covers Swedish history from the beginning of the Renaissance period up until the Dacca Revolt, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm especially interested in this volume. Like I said with the History of Iceland book, I'm more familiar with early medieval or especially pre-Christian Nordic history. So I'm looking forward to this one because I'd like to learn more about late medieval and early modern Scandinavian history in general. So yeah, and these 2 books were published in 1970, in case anyone's curious about the publication date. But yeah, another view of that cover. Very into the covers of these 2 books, or all 3 of these books so far. The next one, we are now moving to the East Mediterranean, is The Peloponnesian War by Thucydides. And this is one of 2 books I decided to buy after completing Christian Cameron's Long War series last year. For those who don't know, the Long War is a 6-book historical fiction series about the Greco-Persian Wars from the perspective of Arimnestos of Plataea, who is a Greek general. And it kind of follows his life from childhood until, later on. We won't spoil anything. Anyways, after finishing that series, I started getting a craving to read about the politics surrounding the Greco-Persian Wars and its outcomes. This book, of course, is primarily about the Peloponnesian War, which through politics relates to the Greco-Persian Wars. And Thucydides does talk about the Greco-Persian Wars in Peloponnesian War. And as far as when this was written, it was originally written in between 431 and 411 BC. And Thucydides himself did fight in the Peloponnesian War, and he wrote this history as it was occurring. Next book was surprisingly hard to find. I ordered it originally from Indigo, and it was supposed to come with the History of Iceland, the Histories of the Swedish People, and the Peloponnesian War, but Indigo apparently could not find it for me, so I had to actually resort to Book Depository to get this one. So this is The Rise and Fall of Athens, 9 Greek Lives by Plutarch. And yeah, this is the second book I decided I wanted to buy after finishing the Long War series. One of the things I wound up loving most about the Long War was the time spent in Athens covering the intrigue of Athenian politics and the major Athenian political figures or personalities. So this book contains 9 biographies written by Plutarch about important historical figures in Athens history, from the city's foundation to its defeat by the Spartans. It includes biographies of Aristides and Themistocles, who were also significant characters in the Long War series. So yeah, I'm excited to read this one as well. And yeah, this is significantly smaller than the Peloponnesian War, for sure. Okay, so we are done with the history section of this book haul, and we're going to move on to fantasy. The first fantasy book that I got as part of this book haul is Inda, and this is the first book in a 4-part series by Sherwood Smith. The first book, this one here, Inda, was published in 2006, and the description reads, Indavan Dal was the second son of the Prince of Korad Algar. Not too sure how to pronounce that. Tradition dictated that when his older brother Tanred inherited the realm, Inda would be his brother's shield arm, his military champion. Tanred, as heir, attended the king's military academy in the royal city, a privilege which Inda, a youth with natural military talent, envied greatly. But like all second sons, Inda was to be privately trained at home by the brother whose lands he would one day protect. Only in times of impending war would the second sons join their older brothers in the royal city, to be trained as captains of the king's armies. So when the king's voice summoned Inda to the king's academy, he might well have felt foreboding, or even fear. War was coming. Yet youthful Inda felt only excitement. But when Inda got to the royal city, he found that there were things that Tanred hadn't prepared him for feuds, infighting, and political factions divided the nobility and found physical, often painful expressions among the students. I'll stop there just in case there's spoilers in the rest of it. It's actually a pretty long description. But yeah, Inda by Sherwood Smith. And I've heard a lot of good things about this series on Our Fantasy in the past. It's been on my list for a few years now. Glad to finally be getting to it. Yeah, apparently there's some interesting magical concepts, I think, in there as well, if I remember correctly. And speaking of, the next book, as you might expect, is book 2 of the series, The Fox. We've also got book 3 of the series, King's Shield. And book 4, Treason's Shore. And these are, by and large, fairly larger, thicker books, it seems. So might take a bit. Yeah, they're in like the 700s. This one's 770 pages. So yeah, probably get to these this year, and probably do a video wrap up once I'm done with them too. Next we have basically I got the Transitions trilogy from the Legend of Drizzt series. So we've got here book 1, The Orc King. Nice cover there. I actually started reading the Drizzt series back in high school, I think around 2001 or thereabouts. I started with Icewind Dale. I know there can be contentions on whether to start with Icewind Dale or Dark Elf trilogy. I'm in camp Icewind Dale. I know that's not necessarily everyone's opinion, but there you have it. Anyways, I fell in love with the series. For the next several years after that, I wound up following it up until Road of the Patriarch, which was book 19 in order of publication, and book 3 of the Sellsword series, which is like a spin-off series of The Legend of Drizzt for those that don't know it. So yeah, a few years ago I basically decided to do a full reread of the books I'd already read in the series, so that I could eventually read some of these newer ones, like Transitions, which is actually the first book of the series that will not be a reread. So that I can eventually read Timeless and the latest ones. So yeah, hopefully I can speed through these. I usually only read like maybe four or five a year, between 3 and 5 of these Legend of Drizzt books a year. So it'll probably still take me a little bit of time to get to Timeless, and the most recent books. So yeah. Anyways, predictably, the other books after The Orc King were The Pirate King and The Ghost King. The next book is one I've been excited for like 2 years now, and it's out. It came out this March, and it's basically the one book I've been super excited for in 2021, and that is Return of the Trickster by Eden Robinson, and that is book 3 of the Trickster trilogy. Her Trickster trilogy is easily, like, hands down one of my favorite all-time series at this point. I absolutely loved Son of the Trickster and Trickster Drift. The first book, Son of a Trickster, is kind of a mix of general fantasy and low fantasy, and the second book moves into what you might call urban fantasy territory, although some readers might actually call it magical realism. Just to give you a bit of an idea as far as genre of these books and what to expect. The first half or more of Son of a Trickster reads a lot more like general fiction, so don't go in expecting like magic and fantastical creatures like right off the bat. But those aspects do kick in later on in the book and in the series. I also wanted to note that although the main character is in his late teens, the series is aimed at a general audience, not a particular age group. And I'll stop there before I go on a rant on my personal feelings about certain marketing terms. But anyways, I'll do a series wrap-up once I'm done this book. The next and final book in this fantasy book haul is Elac of Atlantis and Prince Raynor by Henry Kuttner. So this is basically a collection of 2 sword and sorcery short story series. It's got 4 Elac of Atlantis stories and 2 Prince Raynor stories. I read one of Henry Kuttner's Elac of Atlantis stories this past fall in a volume of Weird Tales magazine stories, and I was highly entertained. It made me really want to read more Elac stories, so I set out on a mighty quest to track down a physical copy of these stories. It was really, really difficult actually to get a hold of this, and thankfully my favorite local bookstore, it's a sci-fi fantasy bookstore, was able to order it in for me, and I'm excited to read it. The cover is a little bit cringy. There was another edition that couldn't be ordered in with a better cover. This one a little bit cringy, but what can you do? Anyways, yeah, I'm excited to read these 1930s sword and sorcery short stories. Like I said, really enjoyed that one Elac of Atlantis story I'd read back last fall for Spooky October, although this story was not particularly spooky. But excited for that. And now we are at the end of the fantasy portion of the book haul, and then I've got 2 general fiction books to share with you. And the first is Hunger by Knut Hamsun, and it's just kind of to continue my Scandinavian history and literature kick. I decided to buy a couple of Knut Hamsun books because, from what I understand, he was considered an important modern Norwegian author, so I wanted to check that out. This book was published in 1890, and the description tells us that this is an autobiographical novel recounting the abject poverty, hunger, and despair of a young writer struggling to achieve self-discovery and its ultimate artistic expression. The book probes the psychodynamics of alienation, obsession, and self-destruction, painting an unforgettable portrait of a man driven by forces beyond his control to the edge of the abyss. Hamsun apparently also influenced other major authors like Franz Kafka and James Joyce. The second book is also by Knut Hamsun, and it's The Growth of Soil. This one was published in 1917, so one of his later books. And the description says it's a sweeping saga of sacrifice and struggle, an epic tale that recaptures the world of Norwegian homesteaders at the turn of the 20th century. Anyways, yeah, I was, when I was looking for some 19th and 20th century Norwegian literature, these were some of the big ones that came up, so I decided to give them a try. Anyways, that brings us to the end of this big book haul. If you've read any of these books, feel free to comment down below and let me know what you thought about them. I'm pretty much really excited to read all of these books. I don't think there's any that I'm not interested in, obviously, since I bought them. But yeah. Anyways, that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.